So I think that, as we move away from some of these centralized platforms where you are the product, right, and your data is getting sold, this completely flips the model on its head.
I mean, we're actually getting there ananyway. I started reading The Sovereign Individual, and it kind of talks a lot about that too.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like the opposite of what Alex Jones predicts. Or, well, actually not predicting. It's almost it's the opposite of what people like Alex Jones have been warning us about for decades.
Yeah, they were very prescient, and they wrote this book in 1997 and foresaw the impact that the internet would have on the ability to be a digital nomad and go where you're treated best, and that the different nation states, as we move from a really centralized time period to more decentralized control, go where you're treated best. And legacy, health insurance system is very centralized, and there are many middlemen taking a cut along the way. So in the U.S. every year, we're spending $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare, and 25% of that is administrative, and half of that is waste. But what you're seeing is a growing movement of independent providers. Yes, you've had a lot of pressure and centralization, M&A happening from both private equity groups as well as bigger and bigger health systems. So there are certain care models that I think are ripe for Bitcoin adoption. So I'm not saying let's start with the big United Healthcares of the world, and that's where we can get into some stories of all the corruption and kind of difficulties they're putting providers in by not paying claims and getting hacked all the time. So, for example, with direct primary care is a business model where the independent provider is charging you a monthly membership fee, and you're paying either with cash or credit card, and that's a perfect opportunity to align Bitcoin because there is not a third-party payer, right? So you have that direct connection between a patient and a provider, and that's where I think Bitcoin
isn't that kind of like crowd health, where you're paying a monthly fee and then that money just goes to a provider?
Yeah, and so crowd health's a great example of a solution on the individual side, right? So as an alternative to insurance, I'm paying a lot less now as a member of crowd health than I would on insurance, and now I can go wherever I want for care. And as I helped crowd health last year integrate Bitcoin, and now they're moving to implement lightning payments for peer-to-peer crowdfunding with the purpose of paying the doctor. But now where are those doctors that are accepting Bitcoin? So that I don't have to go back into fiat to pay my doctor.
I don't know any doctors that are accepting. I don't know a single doctor that is accepting that.
Yeah, so one local provider I helped on board is Veronica Max at Ultra Personal Healthcare. So she's a direct primary care provider. I helped a dentist in Michigan integrate Bitcoin payments. And one of a great tool to be able to do this is Zaprite. Right, so with Zaprite, you can accept fiat payments alongside Bitcoin and Lightning. And you're right, there are not a lot of doctors accepting Bitcoin yet. Actually, one of the leaders in this was the Oklahoma Surgery Center. Over a decade ago, started accepting Bitcoin. And one of the reasons is because there generally isn't a lot of price transparency in healthcare. So when you just have insurance, you don't even know what the price of something's going to be, and then you're billed right
but
after
if you don't
the fact.
In your self-pay, there's actually a lot of price transparency because you know exactly what it's going to cost.
Exactly. So my goal in really trying to help move healthcare onto a Bitcoin standard is trying to identify those providers that have a business model that isn't reliant on insurance. They want to prove their value to their patients or their consumer, people that want to show proof of work for their health. They're not just going to want to get a prescription for whatever drug. It's saying, can I understand the root cause of whatever's ailing me? What am I eating? How am I moving my body?
Now here's the other question too, because you're familiar with Operation Choke Point, right?
Yeah.
And just little elevator pitch for those who don't know. Operation Choke Point was basically an Obama administration policy that put extra scrutiny on companies or people that invested in fields and sectors that the government was frowned upon or found dangerous. Now with something like Operation Choke Point, wouldn't there be a risk of if a provider starts accepting Bitcoin for payments, especially with our current government right now? Would they be at risk for audits or other type of or higher levels of scrutiny and more bureaucracy than if they just were to stay on the fiat system?
So I would argue that by accepting Bitcoin, you create this parallel rail for you to accept payments, and we actually see a lot of censorship even on the fiat side, and potentially for the way a doctor provides medicine. And you're allowed to accept Bitcoin, and just like any other, if with the dollar, you're registering that revenue at the point of sale. So whatever the exchange rate is at this point in the tax treatment of Bitcoin, is you can accept Bitcoin. If you sell it and it accrues in purchasing power against the dollar, yes, there's still the capital gains.
No.
But from a revenue perspective, you're just paying income tax based on the revenue
that you make. At the point of sale. Yes.
So that's where, there's definitely been some more pressure on Bitcoin companies, but I don't think that there's generally, we're in America. Bitcoin is speech at the end of the day. It's code. So I think
but right now our government does not seem to really is having trouble remembering where we live.
Yeah, and even you see the Biden administration pivoting a bit over the last couple months, even the last month or so, as Trump has kind of, and even RFK have leaned into Bitcoin and saying that we're going to protect your right to self-custody, to accept Bitcoin and use it. And they're realizing that the Democrats, that it's a losing strategy. So you're already seeing kind of the political game theory playing out a bit, where
you are seeing that, and that is a good thing. But with where we are right now, it's still, first of all, I wouldn't trust Joe Biden as far as I could throw him. You know what I mean? I can't think of a better reference, but I trust Joe Biden about as much as I trust him to not have an accident while giving a speech at a major summit. So that being said, even though he's saying that stuff, I don't necessarily believe that he's going to follow through on his promises, or not just attack the crypto or Bitcoin industry even worse if by some miracle he does get reelected, or another Democrat does get reelected, considering not just their policies on Bitcoin, but like the entire Democratic Party. And this is not a political podcast, right? Well, it is, sometimes it is, but this episode, I don't want to make it political, right? But the entire Democratic Party these past 5 years has just become the party of surveillance and the party of enhancing the security state. So there's just no reason, just based on the actions of the past 5 years, for me to believe anything that the current Democratic Party is saying about freedom money like Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm hopeful that, I think the regulation, as it comes around, even you heard, I was at the Bitcoin conference last year in Miami, and RFK is talking about eliminating the capital gains tax. And, Trump's saying, we want to mine all the Bitcoin in America. So you see a change of tune, and then I think being, super against Bitcoin or crypto more broadly is a losing strategy. And so as businesses and business owners who have that autonomy and really the spirit of entrepreneurship, I'm trying to help that business owner, even if individually they're a Bitcoiner, they're hodling, but they want to bridge the gap and really move just from this individual passion that they have for sound money and integrate that into their business.
Yes. And it also helps. It's also a great way to drive more business, because once you become known as a company accepting Bitcoin, you will attract the business of other Bitcoiners. And generally speaking, Bitcoiners have money to spend, and they want to spend their Bitcoin because they believe it's a better form of money. When I was pettycabbing BitBlock Boom, there were so many people that were like, that I got to literally jump off of their scooters and cancel their Uber rides because I told them, hey man, I accept Bitcoin. I'll give you a 25% discount if you pay with Bitcoin. I have a Lightning wallet right here. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Warren takes scooters. You don't want to do this. Let's go. Come on, get in. All proceeds go to fight communism. And, I got a lot of rides just from doing this. And the beauty of accepting something like this is that you don't even need to charge like super high prices, because you know that you're getting better money. Like I was giving rides from the Hilton to Barton Springs for $20 because I was getting a Lightning payment. Do you think I would ever do that for fiat?
No way.
No, never. I'd be like, yo, $50, dude, let's go. But because I'm like, hey, you're sending Bitcoin? All right, that's fine. No worries. Let's go.
Exactly. And that's, for every individual, they can make that decision for themselves on, hey, am I spending Bitcoin here? But usually Bitcoiners want to support business owners or like yourself, Pedicab, saying, you've done the proof of work to understand Bitcoin and learn how to accept it as payment. You might even be offering discounts, which is one great incentive to get people even thinking about Bitcoin. Or even you can plug into a business like Oshi and offer Bitcoin rewards.
Yeah.
Or even if someone is using a credit card or paying in cash, you can offer them sats back for that payment, which is, again, another incentive in a way that instead of depreciating Starbucks stars, you're getting appreciating Bitcoin right?
Yeah.
That's gone up 150% year over year for the last decade. To increase your average order value, increase retention, and exactly as you're saying, just overall increase your business.
Well, I talked to Michael and tried to ask if they wanted to advertise and do stuff on the cab. Oh, that invitation's always open, so that'd be awesome if they ever do. And I'm very grateful that I'm able to like, I'm at a point, right? And I haven't made it like big, but that's fine. I've done enough work where I think I'm able to have advertising revenue that's in sync with how I actually feel and see the world around me.
Yeah.
Like the company advertising on my cab right now called Unjected, it's a dating site for unvaccinated singles. Like I know the people who run the company, and I got that ad deal from knowing the people and building a relationship with those people. And you know what? When that ad deal runs out, either we do another ad deal, or I'm going to find another company whose values I align with to put all over my pedicab. And I think that I've done enough, and I've done this, and I've so far been grateful enough to be able to do everything in good faith. Where there'll always be somebody that wants to have some kind of a collaborative partnership as a result of this.
Yeah, and I think you see that in the Bitcoin space, whether for podcasters or others, kind of spreading the message and finding those aligned companies from a sponsor perspective, and then finding those brands. And I think Oshi Marketplace is a great example where you're finding beef tallow products or grass-fed beef and the Beef Initiative and all these ways that it's actually meeting this kind of heightened health consciousness as well as understanding of Bitcoin. And I think you'd be interested in this story too of a local business. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be healthcare. These principles for really adopting Bitcoin in your business apply across different industries. I'm working with architects. I've worked and also locally with an e-bike shop. So if you know Mod Bikes here in Austin, not sure if there's any e-bike pedicabs, but
all of our bikes have motors.
Yeah, so you've got a motor in it already. So you guys are e-bikes in one way or another. But you're seeing where I work with Mod Bikes. They're now accepting Bitcoin. They're offering Bitcoin rewards. They've seen a few purchases already in Bitcoin, and even from the purpose of, hey, I want to support this business and spend Bitcoin. So that's example of a local business we've gotten onboarded through education, through understanding that they can tap into this market of people that, it's a sweet product. If you have a sweet, innovative, quality product, like Bitcoiners are going to be into that.
Yeah, and Austin is like the perfect place for an e-bike. Perfect place. You navigate the traffic. You go pretty fast. It's hot outside. The wind. You feel the wind. Great thing to take to Barton Springs.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I think that is awesome. And maybe they could be my next advertising.
Yeah,
I think that's actually very popular. I could be like, yo, listen, me and Jon Gordon are friends, and I accept Bitcoin, and these are my rates. And if you want to, if you want to pay with Sats, like we will offer like I said, 25% discount or whatever you want to pay me. Let's get it.
They have some fun sidecars. You can get, put your dog in there, put your kid in there. It's like really fun product. And what's interesting too is, it's a higher ticket item, right? So it's about, the average bike's maybe $2,500. So they're accepting payments via Stripe's Shopify store. But what's been interesting is, actually now on the user side, how are we going to pay for that, right? Because that's a little bit of a bigger transaction.
I don't think you can pay Lightning for that's.
So actually, Tony, he wrote up a great article on this. Highly recommend reading of his experience buying, and actually found that using a federation. So I don't know if you're familiar with eCash.
So I've heard that, but I don't understand what that is. So if you could explain eCash, like I wear a mask alone to drive my car, I would actually really love that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, getting familiar and learning myself. A great book I'd recommend is the Genesis book by Aaron von Wirdrum, kind of talking about the early days of cryptography and eCash and public-private key cryptography that was developed in the 70s, and David Chaum and eCash developed in really the 80s and 90s. And where we're seeing those previous projects failed was due to the centralization at the end of the day of the eCash. We now have Bitcoin as the backbone of eCash. So basically, when you join a Fediment, you can deposit Bitcoin, just like you would normally deposit and send to your own address. And what the Mint is doing is they're swapping that Bitcoin for eCash using a blind signature scheme. So there's a lot of privacy, and you basically have this eCash that now is validated and pre-signed, basically.
Okay, but how do I spend eCash, and how do I get because I can't get eCash on. I can't be like spending eCash on Mutiny or like.
Yes, you can actually.
What?
So
wait, okay.
Yeah, so Mutiny is integrated Fedimints, and basically what that means is now, and what Tony in the article describes, is the Fediment is now the one interacting with the Lightning Network and has a Lightning gateway. So when you point your camera and want to pay that Lightning invoice, for example, from Mod Bikes, you can point it like you normally would, and what the Mint is doing is actually swapping your eCash back for Bitcoin, sending it over the Lightning Network to the merchant and settling that transaction at the speed of light and for a fraction
and
of the
eCash
cost.
is like a stable coin, right?
So it's not its own coin or a stable coin. It's really like, you can think about it as a representation of Bitcoin. So there is an element of trust in the model of eCash, right? So you're trusting that the Fediment, people running the Fediment won't rug you, right? So there's guardians involved. So there is an element of trust, but you can think about it as like an in-between between self-custodial, holding your own wallet, right? And a exchange like a Coinbase or even a Strike or River, for example, right?
But eCash is more for spending than for holding. That's what I look at. I'm just like, it's
exactly.
Like you have eCash so that you could spend money. You're not like saving in eCash.
Exactly.
You're just like, okay, I got to convert this Lightning or this Bitcoin to eCash so I can send it to a provider.
Exactly.
And then
so
that's over. And then they should be taking that eCash and putting it. Do they convert it to Lightning when they get the eCash?
So the mint was already converting that back into Lightning for mod, for example. So that transaction settles over the Lightning Network, and the mint is the one doing that conversion. So one of the challenges of self-custodial Lightning is running your own node, right? And even like Moon Wallet isn't really using Lightning, it's using these submarine swaps, and the invoice was timing out. So yes,
I remember that, dude, because sorry for interrupting, but I tried to put my Lightning Moon Wallet QR code, and it wouldn't, after like an hour, that thing wouldn't, I have to use a new QR code.
Yep. So
is that the same with Mutiny? Like if I were to like, because I actually have stopped putting my QR codes on the things because of I guess because of privacy, and using the same QR code is not like the best practice. And also, generally speaking, when you don't have the QR code, they have to pay you afterwards, so then they're more likely to tip you more. So I've noticed that that's just a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And people are drunk, and if they send Bitcoin, they might send Bitcoin to Lightning or send the wrong thing. So I'm just like, let's just do it afterwards. It's easy. It's just easier to just do it afterwards. You know, or like somebody gets wasted and sends you a whole Bitcoin versus like, and then you have to deal with a bunch of bullshit. So I'm just like, look, let's just pay. We'll pay afterwards. Here are my QR codes.
Yeah.
And we'll do it after. And this way, you're doing it like in good faith without complications.
So for Mutiny, it's using all three really. So actually when you accept the mint, if you're a part of a mint, the mint is the one that's actually accepting on your behalf. So you don't have to worry necessarily about opening up your own channel, right? And managing channels in Lightning can be difficult and sometimes costly.
I don't even fuck with that. I literally
exactly.
Like if the Lightning balances get to like $400 or $500, you're either spending it on something or you're just going to move it to cold storage and leave it alone.
So you have on-chain with Mutiny, you have on-chain Bitcoin. You can swap into Lightning, or at the end of the day, you can use it as an eCash wallet. And that's where I see kind of the education perspective from both the user and the merchant is that, eCash, and you have both Cashew, which is where an individual runs the mint, or you have Fediment, where there's a federated model. So think about multisig, kind of like what Unchained does. There's multiple keys, and that's the arrangement. And that's, I think, a middle ground that will help Bitcoin scale even further. And the tools are getting there. It's really a more recent development. There's a company called Fedi that's building on Fediment, but it's an open source protocol, just like Bitcoin. And I think as Bitcoin continues to grow in purchasing power, more people want Bitcoin, and then eventually spending Bitcoin at businesses that they value. This can be one of the ways that makes spending a lot easier and private, because the mint doesn't even know how much eCash you have or where you're spending it. But because of the way that the signatures are signed, they know that basically that eCash is legit.
Okay, that's
hopefully that's a helpful. We don't have to go too much deeper, but that's like at a high level what it is.
It's something I need to kind of learn and develop a greater knowledge of. But like I said, there's time. And a lot of times people make the mistake of rushing into things because everybody is acting on emotions. Just take your time, learn, be grateful for where you are, have humility, and just, rely on people that make friends of people in this community who know more than you, and just let them, if there's a question, don't do anything until you ask a question. I mean, I updated my Linux, but I was like, okay, like it seems I updated and I was kind of scared to do that. And I was like asking Jim about like what to do from PlebLab. And then I'm just like, wait a minute. I could go to PlebLab and do this, but I have to deal with another computer issue, so that'd be too much. And B, we already installed the original operating system on a thumb drive anyway. So if anything does happen that's bad, I have that thumb drive regardless. So it doesn't seem like it's the end of the world if I have the original thing, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Linux as an open source operating system definitely led the way, and we're using software or even hardware that's continuing to kind of encroach from a privacy perspective. So that's where I love too, even what companies like Daylight. I don't know if you've seen Daylight Computer. That's a new tablet that's blue light free and not nearly as addictive, and they're building their whole like hardware and software stack that I think eventually will be really usable with a lot of these with Bitcoin and Lightning, and having it more even natively interoperable in these devices. They were in Austin a couple months ago.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but just kind of on the theme of like building from scratch. That's definitely the Bitcoiner ethos and shipping code. And from me personally, my background isn't software development, but I've studied this. I've read Mastering Bitcoin. I've been running a node. And
I'm still
just participating in the network is one step.
I still have the software. I have like the Star 9. I have not integrated the node yet with the wallets.
Okay.
But honestly,
if you have Start 9, you're already halfway there.
But like I said, with this, I'm taking my time.
Yep.
Depending on how the price is, this cycle, my goal is to just make good, solid life improvements, and that's where I'm at. Or where we are at in price. My whole thing is like, all right, listen, I'm just gonna like go in and out on Bitcoin, right? It's like, if you have to make a big purchase, okay, take a couple $1,000s out to purchase stuff, and then every time you get a cash out payment, just like put it right back into Bitcoin and just kind of like save to spend and save to just kind of do that for now until you figure out what happens with the price.
Yeah. Are most pedicabers or any other pedicabers accepting Bitcoin like you, or what are the main?
Couple, but
they use Venmo or Cash App. What do they usually use?
Venmo and Cash App, and really? I talk about, I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle started pedicabbing, Kyle Murphy.
Right.
I talk about it all the time, but they just never did it, and I'm just like, I'm like, listen, it's really easy. Just take your Cash App money, convert it to Bitcoin. Really simple, right? Bear market, no one wants to hear it. They're laughing at you.
Yeah.
Bull market, everyone's now a shitcoiner.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, no, dude, buy Solana, buy this, buy that.
There's literally millions of coins that are just these meme coins coming out of Solana. Because what is it at the end of the day? It's a click of a button. You can change the software code of Bitcoin's open source and create your own coin.
Yeah.
But what's going to lead it to having value? In my opinion, none of that is money. The only
thing is obviously Bitcoin.
That's money is Bitcoin.
But this is actually going to fuck up the cycle, and people like. And there's a reason why like the altcoins haven't gone up very much. And I think, well, you're still early in the halving cycle, so that's one factor. But if you don't get a big altcoin boom, right, the reason is because there's supply inflation in terms of how easy it is to just always make a new coin, and everything will get diluted. But that dilution is also, at least in this cycle, going to suppress the price of Bitcoin. And it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be like the cash and carry stuff that Coinbase is doing, or like selling paper Bitcoin or anything like that, because that could actually, because of how Bitcoin is, I feel like that's a problem that should easily be kind of fixed and remedied. And eventually you get a big short squeeze because you just look at the blockchain and audit it, and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't even make any sense. Just keep buying.
Yeah. That's what happened last cycle with FTX, and they owed people $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, and they had one Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So there's going to be bad actors, and there's going to be shit coins out there. But I think with each cycle, people generally come to the conclusion and realize this is money. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin.
Or there's another factor, right? And the factor is that with each passing cycle, and with each successful debasement of currency, and with each like successful period of culture degrading itself and people becoming more mentally ill and more unhinged, and being manipulated by artificial intelligence and lack of personal community, they fall victims to more negative stuff, and then they get even more retarded with how they, and more degenerate with what they do with their money. And that is also another factor, and you're going to see the world bifurcate into literally two different people. There's going to be like, I'm not going to say the haves and have-nots because that's not right. It's going to be kind of like the people that like the enlightened. I don't even want to say the enlightened. It's going to be like clarity versus chaos. You're going to see clarity versus chaos. And you're seeing it right now.
Have you read the book, The Mandibles?
No.
So that's a book I also recommend reading. Odell talks about it all the time and says, Mandibles, then Bitcoin Standard. But basically it's sort of a dystopian novel set only in 2029. It was written, I think, in the mid-2010s. And Alina Shriver, the author, kind of depicts what happens when the dollar fails, and the International's kind of Bancor, which is something that Keynes originally proposed, kind of comes back, and you see what happens with the degradation of society and sort of the chaos, particularly in big cities. The book is set in New York City, but highly recommend reading that book. And I think that also speaks to, and you mentioned community being so important, like having people that you really get to know, that you trust, and that are aligned from a values perspective. And that's where, since my wife and I come into Austin a couple of years ago, we've just absolutely loved it. And seeing that there's more and more tools that Bitcoiners and those that are in the Nostr ecosystem are building.
Yeah.
If you're I don't know if you were familiar with Nostr.
I have Nostr. I think we follow each other. But
yeah. So notes and other stuff transmitted by Relay. A lot of the clients today are kind of social media clones, right? And you have great apps like Primal, Amethyst, Damus, where you can, similar to Bitcoin, you have your private and public key, and now that's your identity.
Yes.
And you can bring your identity across these different apps. So you can actually bootstrap and get past the cold start problem for any social network, because now I can bring my NSEC or my private key to any of these apps. And one of the most exciting in my mind around community is called Setlantis.
What's that?
So Alex Svetsky has launched this, and his team and Rob and others. That's really a digital home for physical communities. So it's a travel and community-based site that, think about, I don't know if you know the site Nomad List.
I've heard.
Where you can kind of look around, see what the cost of living is in a city, where are the best places to go eat. It's kind of a mix of like a TripAdvisor / Facebook group or Telegram group, in a place for starting with 50 Bitcoin cities around the world. So Austin is one of them. So anyone, if you already have your Nostr account, you can just sign in and sign up to be a part of the Austin community, basically. And we've got grades on, okay, how is the city from a cost of living perspective, food, Bitcoin adoption, all these different metrics. And it's a way for people now, if you're traveling to a different city or you want to connect with Bitcoiners in your community, you can post events. Merchants will be able to post their information and own their page. So I think that, as we move away from some of these centralized platforms where you are the product, right, and your data is getting sold, this completely flips the model on its head.
I mean, we're actually getting there anyway. I started reading The Sovereign Individual, and it kind of talks a lot about that too.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like the opposite of what Alex Jones predicts. Or, well, actually not predicting. It's almost it's the opposite of what people like Alex Jones have been warning us about for decades.
Yeah, they were very prescient, and they wrote this book in 1997 and foresaw the impact that the internet would have on the ability to be a digital nomad and go where you're treated best, and that the different nation states, as we move from a really centralized time period to more decentralized control, go where you're treated best. And they foresaw Bitcoin. They talk about digital currency and saying
they didn't
that
say Bitcoin, but it was already known.
Yeah,
but they also had like an NSA white paper about how to make a mint from like the 1990s, and it was literally like described Bitcoin to a T apparently. And there's all these other conspiracy theories that say, oh well, the NSA and the government created Bitcoin and XYZ, and I'm like, okay, well, if they did create Bitcoin, it sounds like it's the most American thing ever made.
Oh yeah, Parker talks about that a lot.
These same people. Well, who will say that we're also believing in QAnon about how like there were a bunch of white hats that were working with Donald Trump to expose the global pedophile ring. And I'm like, okay, well, if that logic is true, that would be the most white hat shit I've ever seen.
Yeah,
if you actually did that. And if that does get created by something like, I'm sure that, like the CIA and the NSA have done awful, awful things, right? But like not everybody who works for these agencies is beholden to globalist entities. There are probably a lot of people who work for those entities that
they're good people.
Are like the most patriotic people you'll ever meet. So it's also a possibility that somebody like that could have said, okay, well, maybe I should write a white paper to discuss and talk about this. And maybe one of those guys was friends with Hal Finney or Satoshi Nakamoto or any of those people. So. And even if it is written by the government, like the government, the code is so transparent that it doesn't matter. I don't see how that would matter.
It doesn't. And the way that Bitcoin is distributed and run on nodes, tens of thousands of nodes around the world, and the checks and balances involved, and the miners that are putting in physical, tangible energy to run SHA-256, and that's where SHA-256 was invented by the NSA in 2001. But at the end of the day, it's just a really powerful hashing algorithm, right? 2 to the 256. There's more possibilities than the number of atoms in the universe. So that's what's securing your private keys. That's what miners are are running to find, show proof of work and find a hash with a certain number of leading zeros, basically, to demonstrate to the rest of the network that they've put in work to adding the next block to the blockchain. So yeah, I agree. It doesn't matter because it's open source and we can run this, even so that's the origin story and the mythical origins of Satoshi. We'll be celebrating 16 years coming this October. So we're talking about, I've been working more with Austin Bitcoin Club and organizing some events, thinking about putting together a bigger event this fall to probably celebrate that Sweet 16, because if you think about it, it's still a very, very short amount of time for money to be adopted. Like, gold has taken thousands of years to be adopted. And if you know the Lindy effect, it's when something is in the general consciousness for, usually it takes at least 20 years, then we believe that it'll always exist. Like the internet, we can't imagine a world without the internet, right? But we're at Bitcoin where the internet was, in the early 90s. So we're still at around 1%.
Still early.
Of global adoption, still early, but there are certainly cities and individuals, taking the lead, and that's where I love, Austin is just such a hub for Bitcoin activity. I know you had Carr on recently with Pleb Lab.
Yeah, I did.
With the Bitcoin Commons here. And a lot of builders in the space. There's just a lot of flexibility, and so for me, I know the tools, I know the builders, where I think just if I can hear, hey, tell me about your business, what are you struggling with, how can you want to increase sales, or you want to lower your transaction fees, or you want to find a better treasury asset and not feel this perpetual rat race of trying to save and outpace inflation. Here's how Bitcoin can help your business. So that's going to look different depending on in-person or e-commerce sales. What industry are you in? And so I'm doing a free masterclass next Thursday, just specifically about Bitcoin and healthcare. And just trying to help get the education out there, because I think there's a lot of amazing books that I've read and podcasts and things. You should go to
On It and see if the guys at On It will accept it, because it seems as though the values of Bitcoin are very intertwined with the values that are espoused. I mean, Aubrey Marcus doesn't run the company, but people like Aubrey Marcus and that ethos.
Yeah,
I think that On It could be a really good place where they could start. Hey, buy some Bitcoin, get Bitcoin, buy some Alpha Brain discounts for Bitcoin, stats back. I think that's a gold mine right there. If you can get On It to start accepting Bitcoin.
Okay. Give me an intro.
I could try. My girlfriend works there.
Okay.
So,
well, there you go.
I can probably do that. I know the guy, Sky King, who used to do podcasts for Aubrey Marcus. I had him on.
Okay.
And he's actually a fan of a lot of my stuff.
Nice.
I should talk to, and he's a Bitcoin person, because I gave him a ride once and he gave me the best tip I ever received.
Amazing.
I'm not going to share what it is, but it was a very good tip. And I'm like, dude, before we got in, I'm like, hey man, you could get a discount if you pay with Bitcoin. He's like, dude, I'm not giving you my stack. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And he started laughing at me when I said that.
Yeah.
So I get that reaction too. Sometimes people will be like, why Bitcoin? And they'll be skeptical and sneer at you a little bit, and you explain it, and they're like, oh wow, this guy's intelligent. That makes sense. And then other times they'll be like, what are you smoking? I'm not giving you that.
Yeah, and most people will ignore something for the first 8 to 10 times they hear it. So, but even you saying, "Hey, I accept Bitcoin," that's one more touch point. That's one more education piece for them to say, "Oh, there's a reason why you've done this. You're not just a crazy person who's saying, "Oh, pay me Bitcoin." You're actually understanding that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and you want to increase your stack, as much as possible.
Yes. And usually, you'll generally speaking get better tips anyway in fiat, because they'll be like, "Oh, I like this guy. He's relatable. He has the same, he has a similar mindset. I could see that guy eating at the same restaurant as me, or I could have gone to the same parties with him in college or something like that." And I think that it helps build the personal relationships.
Absolutely.
What are the challenges that you've been facing in terms of getting businesses to accept Bitcoin? Because Austin is a Bitcoin hub, but nobody is accepting this, man. The fact that I'm a poster person for accepting Bitcoin payments and all I do is ride a tricycle for a living is a problem.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And I think, the first step is making it a priority. And of course, every business is, whether they're opening up a new location or they have multiple locations and they're worried about education for their staff and how people are going to receive this. I just think it's in our fiat inflationary environment where rents are going up, labor prices are going up, all this cost of your inputs are going up, business owners especially might not even have the time or to consider Bitcoin and realize, hey, this can be actually something that strengthens my business, that allows me to slow down. So I think it's just the education right now, and that's why I'm trying to share more resources and say, look, we have amazing educators in the space to start you down your journey.
Not only that, but accepting Bitcoin is probably going to be the difference between having a business and having to default.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. So I think it's getting that mind share, getting the time of day to even have a few minutes to have a conversation. I think going around knocking on doors can be one way, but it's really building those relationships, right? And you have a lot of entrepreneurs here in Austin, and we've been having more and more people come to Austin Bitcoin Club that are business owners that are already Bitcoiners and are thinking about, okay, how can I do this in my business? But I think it's something too that will take time. But eventually you'll see and get, I think, in each industry a first mover advantage for those that are accepting it earlier.
Absolutely. That's a 100% fact. I mean, pedicab shop lords should be accepting Bitcoin because the lease has gone up through the roof, and I own my own cab. It's not a big deal. But if you own a bunch of pedicabs, why are you not like offering discounts and saying, hey man, we'll take $100 off lease, send some Bitcoin, send some Bitcoin, send some Bitcoin. All of a sudden now, like, pedicab drivers, theoretically, if we're using the right practices, like, we become like upper middle class through hard work and being organic, and we get to actually stimulate the economy in like the way that it's supposed to be stimulated.
You're providing a valuable service to get people from point A to point B in a much better way, and really in a city like Austin where you have a really active nightlife and there gets to be some congestion and traffic, and just a fun way to explore the city.
Super fun, and it's proof of work. And Uber and Lyft, that's proof of stake.
Yes.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, bro, that's Vitalik takes Ubers. You want to be that guy?
Yeah, no,
disgusting,
gross. I definitely don't want to.
No, not at all. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something, and I totally how do you feel about this whole bird flu stuff?
I mean, just more noise. I love being able to go to local pastures here, get my raw milk, and for a long time I didn't think I could really handle dairy, but I think it was just the pasteurization process in general. So, I'd say I'm not paying too much attention to it. Like, I think one of the best parts about living in Austin is shaking your rancher's hand, being able to buy locally sourced foods every day of the week, and whether it's beef, raw milk, eggs, cheese, all these products are, even way higher quality than I can get back home in Chicago. Obviously, there's ranchers up there, but a lot of the Midwest has been sprayed with glyphosate for years. And, you have farmers markets in the summer, but here it's all year round. So I'd say I'm not too worried about any of that kind of news right now.
So, and this is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And it's that a lot of people, if you go on X, and I spend a little too much time in it, and it's unfortunate because of what I'm making. It's just it's what it is. It's who you have to interact with, and this is the general the way that narratives are going to be shared are going to be through X because nobody trusts mainstream media anymore, right? It's what it is. But that being said, there's a lot of worry about bird flu and how they're going to poison the chickens and we're going to get food shortages, and maybe there'll be lockdowns, or maybe some of these climate goals where they literally try to limit the big ag's ability to produce food in mass could potentially cause a lot of inflation in XYZ, right? But I'm not really too worried about it because
you know where your food comes from.
I know my farmer.
Yes.
I don't see how this bird flu stuff is going to have any effect on me going to Henry out in Llano and just picking up my food from him, or you calling Cole and picking up your food from him, or using the Beef Initiative. And I think that being the ability to use Bitcoin and the popularity of regenerative farming and the community that's been built as a result of that is going to make this potentially awful crisis, because this type of stuff could create food shortages, right?
Yeah,
you look at what happened with COVID. 100%. People destroyed the economy because of the cold. You could easily fearmonger people into saying, hey man, you can't buy meat, and now we have to food ration and do price controls and do all this other stuff. But because of regenerative farming, because of Bitcoin, because of companies and people like Slim and Cole and the farmer I get my meat from, it's going to be a lot harder to pull something like that off. And I just feel as though Bitcoin and community farming and the popularity of shaking your rancher's hand has actually made it so I'm not worried about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were a couple months ago, couple events really stand out. One was Force of Nature's What Good Shall I Do conference out at Rome Ranch, and you just had a lot of education on regenerative agriculture, on homesteading, on homeschooling, all these alternative ways of living coming back to the land. But I actually think the one piece that was missing there was actually the Bitcoin piece, and how it is becoming harder and harder for ranchers to just be profitable, and because the margins are getting taken by the middlemen. And really, where is the bottleneck? It's the packing, right? So you have 80% of meat packing controlled by 4 companies, right? The Tysons, Cargills, and JBSs of the world. And so when COVID happened and it threw a wrench in people showing up to work, the ranchers are scheduling out a year and a half or 2 to get to process their meat. And so that became the big issue. So yeah, if you're used to going to HEB or some of these big box, Costco's of the world, they're reliant on these bigger systems. But if you know where your food comes from and you're supporting with your own value, whether it's in dollars or Bitcoin, to pay for that beef, well, yeah, there really isn't much to worry about. Because then, yeah, if there actually seriously do become shortages, you have a relationship with them already, and
you're good.
You're good. They're producing only a certain amount, though, but if they already know you, they're going to be more inclined to pay you. And one of the ways that the government has hid inflation is through really a bastardization of the food, right? And stripping out nutrient-dense foods. And actually, I think you were at our having party with
That was a lot of fun.
With Matthew Lisiak.
I saw his last podcast. It was I'm with Press and Pitch. I listened to that.
Yes.
Super informative. Does that guy live in Austin?
He's out in Arizona, but he came to Austin for our event.
I'm going to hit him up and ask him to come on, because that would be so much fun to have him on.
Highly recommend Fiat Food. Gets into the whole story of how our broken money and coming off the gold standard in 1971 was tied with a lot of top-down directives on movement towards highly processed foods, that now 60% of everybody are eating ultra-processed foods, and just causing the massive health challenges that we have that now lead to this bloated healthcare industry. So that's where it really all ties together.
Destruction of the culture, which is it's very much in tune. A lot of conservative influences get really angry about all the prevalence of the Pride Month and all the gay and the trans kids and all this wokeness that's perpetuated. And I'm just like, okay, cool. But you understand that the food that you're being fed and the water that you're being that you're being given and the medications that you're being forced to take, or that you're being bombarded with, are literally causing the problem that you're upset about. And if you just started using Bitcoin, if you started actually learning how to grow your own food, if you cultivated a relationship with your farmer, you could opt out of this without being angry. But a lot of people, too, what I've noticed is that they enjoy being angry more than they enjoy solving problems, and there's a grift in being angry, and there is profitability in always being a victim. And that is, I've seen it, the prevalence of that, especially lately on conservative Twitter. It's made me it's been one of the most off-putting things I've ever seen. You know, and I'm just like, no, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. And the videos I make, it's all going to be fun. And I'm going to only the goal is be in a good mood and touch grass, and everything is try to be in good faith positive,
Absolutely. And that's where I think the ethos of Bitcoin and Bitcoiners who've already come to these conclusions, and any brand or product or service that, aligns with these values and recognizes, yes, inflation, this is what Hayek said. If you read, the well-known Austrian economist, or he really should be more well-read, is inflation causes a perennial stain on our culture. And I think we're experiencing that now, because the money is broken, that it leads to a lot of degeneracy and a lot of other aspects that we don't necessarily agree with. And if you go back to history and really study history, and you read what happened 100 years ago and when money dies in Weimar Republic, very similar.
Very similar. And then you're seeing literal Nazism start taking hold right now on this platform. And you're seeing a lot of this manifest too after October 7th, and that's a whole, we're both Jews, and it's kind of wild that you see yourself getting accused of oh man, we caused the COVID epidemic. We are the ones who perpetrated the vaccine onto people. We're the ones who invented transgenders, and we're bringing in all the illegal aliens in, and this and that. And I'm just or the ADL is a Jewish organization. Yeah. And first of all, I think that a lot of us, not you and me, but I think a lot of people in our community are not handling this very well, and they're reacting very emotionally. They're getting very angry. They're calling people Hamas supporters. They're calling people. They're throwing the Nazi word around. They're passing these laws, trying to pass these laws to limit speech and all this other stuff, or supporting the anti-Israel protesters to be violently arrested by police and this and that. And I'm just no, all that's going to do is make people hate you more and create martyrdom and do all of this other stuff.
There's been definitely a market increase in anti-Semitism and
but
attacks,
it's a grift and it's a sign. Sorry for
especially on the campuses.
Dude, on the campuses it's bad. But a lot of the kids on the campuses just don't understand. A lot of them don't understand, and a lot of the times with the campus stuff, I think the solution to doing this stuff is, instead of yelling at them, just be hey man, we're going to hang out with you. We're Jews. We're hanging out with you. We disagree. We got you pizza. We got you food. And we're going to occupy this with you. And you know why? So if the police arrest you, they got to arrest us too. And this way, you're not martyring yourselves. Hey, cool. We're getting arrested with you, and we're going to make sure nothing bad happens to you because we disagree with you, but we're going to be but we're going to be your friends. And you get a camera, and this way, if you're doing that and those guys freak out and lose their shit at you, you expose them for who they are, and then the movement dies down. And if not, then you just get a better, like, you get actual good faith discussions as to how to fix the problem, and then maybe we avoid Armageddon or any of these other horrible things that can happen as a result.
Hundreds of rockets coming from Iran to Israel, and it's like, look, if Israel wasn't able to protect itself, we would have had a massacre on our hands too, and let alone, you know, what happened on October 7th and the invasion
what happened was
Israel,
fucked,
and
dude.
Raping,
it's fucked.
It's horrible.
It's fucked,
and
but it's also fucked that they, like, it's similar to 9/11 in a lot of ways, because the Israeli intelligence kind of knew about this, and they were warned that they shouldn't even have this festival to begin with. And there were all these problems with Netanyahu and the protests against him, and to even have, like, and just the lack of preparedness on Simchas Torah, like the happiest, like, day of the year. A lot of it, there's a lot of stuff really happened that was bad, and a lot of times, like, people in our community don't want to hear any of the, like. Listen, you can't, like, fully run with every conspiracy theory, but I think that the way to, like, fix this narrative is, like, you should, like, you shouldn't discount every conspiracy theory, because there are elements of truth to these things, and I think that you got to meet people where they are. Otherwise, we get more divided, and otherwise, a lot of this, like, I know that I'm going off on a tangent.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's and I think it comes back to, like, this centralization versus decentralization. We're living in this modern nation state era where, you know, and the Jews have lived for thousands of years before having a modern nation state of Israel, and I think will continue to persist after. And in this modern paradigm, like, why can't there be one Jewish state? And if anything, you see Jews being kicked out of other Arab lands over the last 80 years.
Yes,
way more,
absolutely.
Way more so.
Yeah.
So, but kind of the point is, yes, there are challenges right now where we just have, at the end of the day, money and state are tied together, and in whatever nation state you're looking at now, I think you're starting to see the differences in when the state prints money beyond its capacity to produce. You end up with hyperinflation. You end up with riots. You end up with increasing scapegoating, increasing food costs. And at the end of the day, the Jews in 1930s Germany would have loved to have something like Bitcoin, where when they were leaving Germany and had to give up all their, if they were able to get out and they had to give up all their gold, well, now we can go with 12 words in our head and we can secure our wealth.
Not even the Jews. If the
Anybody.
Germans had Bitcoin, they wouldn't have fallen for all that bullshit, and the Holocaust and all that other stuff never would have even happened.
Yeah, I mean, we're just seeing a lot of this hatred across the board, and that's where I come back to a lot of my spiritual practice and learning, both on the Jewish side and then also studying yoga. And actually, one of the ways I went down kind of alongside the Bitcoin rabbit hole was studying yoga. Like 2.5-3 years ago, we went to Bali during COVID, had to quarantine in a Jakarta hotel room for a week before we could even leave because of all the COVID stuff. But went to Bali, studied yoga, and I teach a lot of Himalayan Kriya yoga practices. So as you're talking about this anger and this kind of pent up emotion that people feel, it's visceral. It's literally inside of you, and we're energetic beings. And these Kriya practices are ways that you can release that emotion, release that negative energy from the body, going down your chakras, your energetic centers, and combining both movement and active meditation and a lot of Kali breath, Kali mudra, just letting it go. And then you actually naturally release DMT in your own body. You're naturally relaxing. You're getting out of the 7% of your mind that is your thinking brain and getting into the 90+% of your subconscious. And once you do these practices, even for, usually the classes that I'm leading are around an hour, you feel completely different, because you realize that a lot of our, the news cycle and all this hyperactivity that we're experiencing is leading to, the chaos we feel. But at the end of the day, what can we control? Ourselves and our own emotions. And we can, tap into these different really ancient practices to feel more aligned, go throughout our every day-to-day life. And for sure, not having sound food is a big part of it. How can we have sound health? Can we have sound money? So that's where, I've come to the conclusion that, and really see the links between these, and want to help.
The links are so in front of you, and it's insane how people are not realizing this, because, like I said, I have an average IQ, drive a tricycle for a living, and have multiple learning disabilities, and they may or may not be on the spectrum, and I can understand this. So if I can understand this, like, it doesn't seem difficult. Oh, well, no, it is difficult.
People don't always want to understand.
Actually,
it challenges the worldview.
It is actually extremely difficult.
Yeah,
I'm just very lucky lucky and blessed to be around really nice people who are helping to guide me along the way, and I want to be able to do the same thing to other people. So that's a better way to phrase it, and I think that's what it is.
And you're open-minded. I think anyone, we were educated and brought up a certain way, and like that isn't the only way. And if you start just asking the question, and for me it's starting with, what is money? And if you actually start to answer that question and think about what you value, how you value your own time, and store that work that you've put in, and enable more certainty into the future, right? Lower your time preference and actually be able to save. Well, our fiat perennial inflation doesn't enable you to save. You're incentivized to spend that money right away, and that creates this hyper consumer culture that we have, and really a disincentive to save, when at the end of the day, how was our civilization built is through the accumulation of capital. And now that capital has been spent into the future by increasing our debt to $35 trillion, a number that we can't even
And you dilute what you spend on, and everything is gambling.
Yeah.
You either spend it or you gamble it in these stocks that that have no real value, or even in real estate, where you just have to create a lifestyle based on debt. And you have people who may own like 2 or 3 houses, and because they have to pay those off and they have mortgages on them, they had to get that COVID shot in order to like be able to go back and forth. And I'm blessed and lucky that I never had to do that. And I think you guys were probably in the same boat, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, taking on a lot of debt, and even now 7 times average income to buy a house, when 50 years ago it was two times.
But
so
dude, in Bitcoin terms, housing is still going down.
Oh yeah, 8 years ago it was about 600 Bitcoin to buy a house, and now it's 6 Bitcoin.
Yeah, or something. Well, yeah, about 6, right? Yeah, and then in a few years it could be like, yeah. And so that's one way to look at it. Did you find that like do you feel as though maybe the people in our and this is a hyper generalization, like, do you think that like the people in our not the Bitcoin community, but like in the Jewish community here in Austin, like, how would you grade them in terms of like adopting like principles of self-sovereignty and like eating real food and actually being prepared? Because I went to like Chabad on Saturday, and it was like kind of amazing to me. Like what I noticed, and I hate the stereotype, but it's like a lot of us, man, we live on the bagel and cream cheese diet.
Yeah, it's I think that some people are along the way in different ways, and I think especially from like a self-sovereignty and learning about how to protect yourself. I'll say tactical fitness is a great example of Ron. He just went back in the reserves and fighting in Gaza and protecting Israel. And I believe, as well as Ron and others, that the Jewish state has a right to exist,
absolutely,
and to protect itself. Yeah. And his workshops and on Krav Maga and on understanding how to use a gun, all these kinds of things, I think are really valuable for the community here. But then maybe they're not thinking as much about, okay, where am I eating my beef? Because I think, from a kosher perspective, most kosher beef is going to be factory farmed, grain fed.
Why?
And there's only, it's already adding a cost on the kashrut side. And then there's only a couple of companies nationally. I think it's actually a really good business opportunity if you want to make grass fed kosher beef.
But what I'm saying though, how's like, because I've been trying to keep like a kosher diet ish. Yeah. Right, like I don't eat cheeseburgers and I don't eat pork. I haven't eaten pork for like over a year, and I've been doing that. Nice. But I'm like, if I'm getting beef, I'm just like, as long as there's no dairy in the beef, I'm eating the beef. I feel like that's kosher, right?
Yeah.
Like, how is it not kosher to like have grass-fed regenerative beef from a cow? I just don't understand how that would not be kosher.
Yeah, it's a great point, and there's technicalities in the Torah and about slitting the cow's throat in a certain way to make it as painless as possible. And if you think about the life of the cow, if they're being factory farmed and grain fed, even if you slit it first and then it's going tumbling down the chute, that's not a graceful ending to their life.
That's not very kosher.
And yeah, right. That's where I agree. So I've prioritized just eating grass-fed beef where I know the animals are living a great life.
That's how I see it, yeah.
And we're eating nutrient-dense food. I'd love for it to be both, but I think we're not there yet. But that's where it comes from the consumer. And are there enough Jews that care about where their food comes from and would go to a butcher or want to buy that grass-fed beef in the community? I'm definitely seeing like that we're not there yet.
We're not even close. And it's bad.
And so it's like partial, like, of these different communities that get it, and then trying to put the pieces
I think it's
together.
Actually very problematic.
Yeah.
Because look, man, you're seeing like the sequel to Weimar Germany that nobody wants. Okay, it looks as though we're gonna be scapegoated for this, and this is clearly astroturfed. If you look at people like Nick Fuentes, like the majority of the followers are bots, and these like Groyper. These people who are like Groypers and stuff, they may as well just be like Antifa, because it's like when you put Groyper in your bio, it's like putting pronouns in your bio at the same time. It's not really that different. It's like a literal doppelganger. But you see that stuff, right? all over the place. And if you have like an algorithm rewarding you for this, content creators are going to engagement farm for this, which is another problem with the fiat system. Whereas if you were using better money and if you were using better money and better protocols and better avenues for this stuff, you wouldn't need to do that. So it's kind of like a sign about where you're at in life. If you're embracing this kind of stuff at this point in the game, I'm not angry at you. I almost feel bad for you. I'm like, how sad and how bad was your decision making financially and whatnot, that this is what you need to do in order to engagement farm? Like, that's actually really sad and another symptom. But when you're seeing this, and these AstroTurf messages can turn into reality. Like, look at what happened with George Floyd. All of that was AstroTurf, and you had full blown riots all like for a whole summer. With that being said, though, like, you know, and most Jewish people, like, it's a stereotype, but we got money. Jews, generally speaking, are pretty successful. You know, they gravitate towards careers we work hard, have the right values, all that, but we do gravitate towards careers that are pretty well paying. And so if there's a community that can afford to eat grass-fed beef from a regenerative farm, or have some Bitcoin, or learn how to grow their own food, or afford a membership at an MMA gym and learn how to use a firearm, I feel like there's no more of an important time to do that, considering where we are right now.
100%.
And the fact that it's not occurring, and it's not encouraged by even like the rabbis and people in that community, should be fixed.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, and even one of the parallels, I think, between Judaism and Bitcoin, you know, I think about Judaism persisting for thousands of years, very much similar to Bitcoin, having rules without rulers, right? And once the Second Temple was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans, you know, you have really distinct cultures of Judaism all over the world that I've traveled to and connected with on a personal level, from Buenos Aires to Budapest to Crete, Greece, and everyone has into Poland, and everyone has their own, you know, unique story and kind of how they've arrived there. But it has been a set of, whether it's the Ten Commandments or the Torah more strictly, kind of a set of guidelines, just like Bitcoin is a set of rules, you know, really to live by. And despite not having, you know, a pope, for example, or someone that's like a figurehead to just make the rules, you do have local community leaders taking the role of the rabbi or of the cantor, or of even just a layperson. And I think that's one of the reasons why, despite, you know, 6 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust, and still only having less Jews today, 14 million, than there were before the Holocaust, you continue to persist and find community and have those sound values. So yeah, I certainly hope that, I think the Jewish community will come around to some of these other practices that we're coming to just from like an American perspective, and having been in America, and my family, you know, for 100 years has maybe gotten complacent, and now we're realizing, hey, the America that, you know, they grew up on in this, you know, being dominant in the 60s and 70s has continued to unravel throughout the 90s and the culture wars, and now up until today, where if you read The Fourth Turning, we're very much in that crisis period. And I believe the millennial generation is very much aligned with the hero generation and the constellation of where we align in the broader saculum, or those 80-year cycles. So
it feels like there is a cultural shift, and it feels as though we are the team humanity is winning, but a lot of people do not know that they're winning, and there's also a lot of grifters who are not ready to win yet, because once team humanity wins, a lot of the right-wing content creators no longer have to find real jobs.
Yeah, and I'm optimistic, and I think, like as Marty Bent says, you know, they'll take the white pill and, you know, be optimistic about the future. Like, I feel confident because I have now an understanding of Bitcoin. We've met people, and we've built a community that has aligned values, and of course still really grateful for where we grew up and how in that, but at the same time love it, traveling the world, love meeting new people, and making babies. You know, we have a daughter now, and
me and
definitely
Vanessa are trying, and it's scary, and I want to do it, and I wish I did it when I was younger, but I'm grateful that I'm able to even think about that. And dude, Psalm 91, I've read that. I try to read that like before bed and stuff.
Nice.
And it literally, you know, epitomizes what we were talking about, how like, yes, this is happening, but you know, if you have faith and you do the right things and abide by the best practices and do your best and know that you're flawed and just try to like love God and really like do your best to serve God, whatever capability you can, you will be, you know, the world may burn around you, but you'll be okay, and you just get as many people as you can to like go to walk over the bridge to safety. And there's a literal bridge to walk over right now to safety. And when you see people talking about burning things and attacking people in military tribunals and all this crazy wacko shit that you see, I'm like, hey man, I get it. There should be accountability, and it should be a very serious level of accountability so this doesn't happen again. But honestly, like, just walk across the bridge. Like, literally walk across the bridge, and don't let like just figure out a way to make it so when you do walk across the bridge, there's just better people on the other side of the bridge so that you don't have to deal with this anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And I found, I think finding those people in the Bitcoin community, now those building on Nostr, maybe you spend a little less time on X and a little more, on Nostr, and we don't have as much of that, the algorithm kind of putting down your throat, a lot of that negativity or conflict.
They can't get rid of your Nostr account because it's all private.
Yeah, so the way it works is you have different relays, and you could always, at the end of the day, run your own relay if a relay were to censor you, and that's the way you share your notes to others on the network.
Okay.
So I think I'm pretty bullish on this kind of technology that can, again, take the hands out of even the powers of these big companies that are selling our data and that are invading our privacy, but it takes a level of that personal decision, or really a business decision to say, I'm going to invest the time, even if it's a couple hours, even if it's in one project. I'm usually working with businesses 2 to 3 months, but we can go a little even faster. But to make them and their people comfortable with even challenging the worldviews on what is money, here's how the fiat system works, here's how Bitcoin and the Lightning Network works, get you set up for payments, get you set up with your treasury, talk about marketing, get your word out there in the community, maybe offer Bitcoin rewards, and then get out. And then also say, like, here's how you set up a business for success. That's where my goal is, reaching more business owners, especially local mom and pop shops that want to plant a flag in a community and tap into their local Bitcoin meetup.
So last question before we go.
Yeah.
What are the obstacles for like some of these smaller businesses to accepting Bitcoin? Because for me as a pedicabber, right, I all you have to do is set up a wallet, right? And you could even use Cash App if you wanted to, but if you don't want to do that, right, you set up a blue wallet, you set up like Mutiny or Zeus or Moon or something like that, right? You set up a wallet, and then you just accept the payments. And as long as you remember your stuff, and as long as you have cold storage, which you can set up by buying like a Trezor or a Ledger or a cold card, or get a multi-sig or do something like that, which it looks overwhelming, but it's not that. If you understand the steps, hey man, download this wallet, here's a QR code now that you have this Bitcoin. Just remember those words.
It's finding...
Are there any other obstacles that like a restaurant would have to deal with? Because for me as a pedicabber, just get the QR code and get paid. But like as a food service business, or as like a gym or something like that, are there any like obstacles that I'm missing?
Yeah, I think it's trying to limit the amount of additional steps and making it as seamless as possible to integrate into their operations. So a lot of businesses, if they're, say, have a Shopify store, they don't want to have a separate checkout for Bitcoin. They want it to be integrated checkout, and that's where the Strike tool comes in handy. And then I think for a small business, Zaporite's a great solution because you can now accept credit card and ACH alongside Bitcoin, and then you have better records, I'd say, right? So if you just have your wallet, you're also always having to send that to the individual who's paying. The nice thing about Zaporite, for example, is you can just send an invoice, and then when they're ready to pay, they can click Bitcoin or Lightning and generate that address. So you're not, the kind of the old school way of just sending your address to someone. You have a bit more of a polished experience. And
but
I
your
think
Bitcoin address changes. Like every time you get a payment, the address is still...
Yeah, so the next time you
have to put a new address in every single time, right?
You have to upload an XPub or connect to your own chain. So there's different options on, say, the back end of Zaporite. But an in-person store, Square doesn't have payments integrated directly into their point of sale. So what is going to be the process? Are you going to have a separate iPad? Do you maybe want to just offer Bitcoin rewards? You don't want to start with payments. These are all the discussions, and even fiat convertibility, right, is another consideration. So a business, depending on their cash flow, they might need that money to go pay their other vendors, and their vendors aren't accepting Bitcoin. So some vendors might need a fiat convertibility. So these are all, these are all the discussion points.
Dude, nobody uses Strike in Austin.
I mean, people have Strike, but
I'm like, dude, I take like everyone's saying, hey, I got one Strike payment the entire time that I've.
That's interesting. No,
everyone's like, you got Venmo, you got Cash App, Apple Pay, and I'm just like, how come people just don't use Strike? It's such a big company.
It's a good question. I mean, for a little while, they weren't in Texas. Now they are in Texas again. That could have had something to do with it. Every business, you need to get the money transmitter licenses. Like they're not operating in New York State, for example. But there's other tools then, like you mentioned Zeus over at PubKey. And so I'd say...
Also, is CrowdHealth, are you able to convert the money to Bitcoin with CrowdHealth? Because I remember like last year, Swan was not operating in Texas. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, for a while, we were saving in Bitcoin. Now, last year I helped them connect with Breeze, and actually Breeze has a Lightning SDK, a software development kit that can turn Crowd Health app into a Lightning wallet. So that hasn't rolled out yet, but it's something they've been working on.
I want to just be able to do that with my Crowd, because I'm kind of annoyed that it never happened.
It's still in the works. You can talk to Andy on that one, but yeah, that was a great example of a project where I helped lay out for Crowd. Here are all the examples of businesses you could work with, but what's going to be the most innovative? It's actually going to be building in Lightning, having these peer-to-peer payments, because that crowdfunding model for healthcare, again, is the perfect use case for Bitcoin. And yeah, at the end of the day, I'll just say, if you have some, even any spare time or you want to learn more, feel free to reach out. My website's satoshihealth.com. I'm the Bitcoin Yogi on social media, and just, I'd love to have a conversation and chat, because as we've touched on here, there's a lot of aspects to it, but if the values of individual sovereignty, of privacy, and, at the end of the day, tapping into a growing consumer cohort of people that want to support businesses and have that value for value exchange, I believe adoption is going to start. I definitely subscribe to Parker Lewis's theory of pay me in Bitcoin. It's going to start from the merchant like yourself, or even like me. For my projects, I'm charging a fiat premium, right? And saying also pay me in Bitcoin, and then that will help educate the consumer. And what's the incentive going to be for them to accept, to get Bitcoin? You're offering a discount, for example, 25%. So I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to individual decision making, and more and more businesses that kind of hop on this train and realize that, at the end of the day, they can strengthen their business by integrating a Bitcoin strategy.
No, I agree. I think that I'm a big small business guy, and that's the only way to make it.
Yeah,
it's that really is.
Yep.
And I don't see any I don't see any other. I like the middle class is being decimated, and a lot of people are really getting raked over the coals. And I'm noticing certain things in terms of how expensive things are, and oh man, I'm we need a better leadership to fix this.
Yeah.
But I'm also lucky because of Bitcoin, that I'm hey man, I'm still better off than I was 5. I'm actually lucky that my life has improved, and I'm just you gotta be you got to be blessed, no matter what. I'm not a big time content maker. I'm not, I don't have 100,000 followers on X. I don't, I'm not I haven't been on Tucker yet, or me and Elon Musk aren't friends, or, I'm not able to monetize what I'm doing. Cool. My life is better off exponentially. I love my job. Great girlfriend. I'm healthy. I get to talk about what I want, when I want, with who I want. And I get to control totally how I make my videos, and I do it for myself. And regardless of what happens, I'm dude, we were talking about the quality of the camera, and I'm just it's look, man, yeah, you want good video, you want good audio, you want top production, but at the end of the day, it's really about what gets said, and the fact, and the, why you're doing this. And you're doing, for me, I'm doing this podcast, to talk to people and for education, right? But it's it actually is in many ways for myself, for me to get smarter and for me to maintain my sanity in this crazy world, throughout these crazy changes, because if I didn't have this podcast or have this thing or even have pedicabbing, I would have gone insane as a result of COVID. And it's thanks to this job, and thanks to being able to do these episodes in person and actually talk to people about what's happening over the course of these years. It's allowed me to keep my sanity throughout this. And that's more important than it's more important than having 100,000 followers on X, because a lot of these people have lost their fucking mind. Yeah,
we got to stay sound and, fix the money, fix the world. Stay humble and stack sats.
Exactly.
And, appreciate it, my man.
John,
Thank
you so much. I really appreciate this. This is awesome.
Thanks.